people in the future. Welcome to part 3. Alright, let's get this going. So, part 3 is going to be called Symbiotic Relationships. And it's really going to be built upon what been going over. And I think each one I'm going to add a little bit more of the philosophy to it, since I had to get this rolling. It's kind of more spaced out than it all in the beginning. Yet I think that might be better, since it's not just like a solid hour of just philosophical ideas and rules before I even really go into the pattern recognition and all that. So, an idea is it's hard to change the world, yet you can pick your spot on it. And that's kind of why I have like the Where's Waldo right there. Imagine there was a wave coming and you could kind of pick where you wanted to go. And my idea earlier, especially with like the reactive tank armor, is that if you can change your environment to a certain way to exclude what you don't want to be a part of, then you don't even have to really think about it day to day. You can know the warning signs and kind of keep a little eye out for that. But beyond that, if you deal with the information up front and its implications and you structure your life around it, you don't have to think about it every day. It's kind of the opposite. It's not that skeleton in the closet that you're kind of always worried about. And I'm going to mention this a lot, and it's one of the best visual metaphors that I can think of for this. And I've already mentioned it earlier, is that, our society itself is a lot like the Titanic. And we all do our roles on it, and, we all have to go to the food court and get our laundry done, and those might not be the best examples yet. We all have our ties to the Titanic, and I don't really know anybody that's actually self-sufficient from it. And as time goes on and on and on, as it breaks down more and more and more, and the idea here is that if you could see the warning signs first and make your way away from it, then you don't have to be a part of that, really. And the inverse of that is that you can actually help people that are on the sinking ship. Yet if you're on the sinking ship while it's sinking, you can kind of, but it's nowhere. You're not actually getting them out of the Titanic, really. You're kind of just, doing the little stuff, which I'm not saying which one's better or worse. More that is everyone's personal decision. And that is not just one iceberg. This could be a whole bunch of increasingly big icebergs, and that ship sinking could take years and years. And in my opinion, it's going to be replaced with like a robo-Titanic for a little while before it's like the full reset. So, it's... in my opinion, it's not a strategy. Especially like up in the corner weathering the storm. You can't really do anything, and not only that, it leaves you at your most vulnerable. And you can keep partying if you want, yet if you're seeing all these interesting signs, like if all of a sudden they come on and be like, hey, we have infinite energy, maybe like, oh. And as someone that's gardening more and more, that's how you have to build a garden. You don't have to, yet if you build a garden and plant all your seeds and just let the deers and all the insects and slugs eat everything, does that make you a good gardener? Are you really caring for the things that you're trying to grow if you're just kind of letting the world go at them? Food for thought. So Stephen King made this book about kind of the end of the world, and during it, good and evil kind of comes to play physically, and the good and the bad people kind of naturally, vibrationally, kind of go to their own areas and start building their own things. And that's in a lot of mythos, but this is kind of like one of the most reoccurring in the recent memory. And I'll build upon the whole Stephen King idea. And we used it as evidence earlier for the dome. So if you start adding all the pieces together, you have a closed system where you're having this cycle, and at the end of it, you have this division between the light and the dark increasingly. And this is kind of the idea we can explore in Westworld a lot, because Westworld's an artificial construct, and they're building artificial beings in there for the gratification of rich people, so rich people can come into this artificial world, do whatever they want, and then they can just rebuild the artificial beings for another cycle, and they just keep doing it over and over and over. And they come in by train. And there's not only Westworld, there's an East World and a whole bunch of others, depending on which experience you want. So there's more than one. And everyone in the experience is trying to get to the center of it to learn the truth. And earlier we were talking about the Garden of Eden and trying to live forever and survive this cyclical apocalypse by going to the center of the earth and following the yellow brick road. The show over and over has a lot of symbolism, especially about fractal natures of reality. And overlords and beings looking and watching down on an artificial construct as everyone's living down there, you know, trying to run their lives and influence them. And in the second season, which I actually haven't seen, there's these like black mechanical bees that they use to control people's minds, and they do it through the radio waves so that they become the perfect slaves. And I believe that's a robot lady controlling everyone's mind so that you're her slave. So you're her slave in an artificial world that she's controlling you through radio waves or light or radiation or energy, depending on how you want to look at that. And when I was a teenager, there was these two series that came out called Hunger Games and The Maze Runner. A lot of people know about the Hunger Games, and it's very similar between the Maze Runner, since in both they're placed inside of artificial environments that they think are real. In Hunger Games, it's more for entertainment, and in Maze Runners, it's literally so they can put them through trauma and suck out their brain juice so they can make a serum that makes them live for longer. And that one's also about there's a garden in the center, and they lose their memory when they go into the center of the maze, and they have to learn the secrets of the maze to escape it. And not only that, there are these giant scorpion monsters, and it turns out later that those aren't natural. Those are being genetically made by the people that made the maze, which are just look like humans, and are there so that they evolve and they can then harvest their brain juice if they survive their encounters. The sequel of The Maze Runner, they go from this kind of tropical forest world to the desert. And in the desert, the dead come to life. And going along with that theme of the dead coming to life, this is probably one of my favorite and most synchronistic video games ever, called Dead Space. And it's kind of sci-fi and zombies put together. And it's one of the more gnarly universes, but the whole reason the zombie apocalypse starts in the first place is from electromagnetic radiation from the thing in the background is called a marker. It kind of looks like DNA twisting on itself, and it can lead you to infinite energy, and if you turn it on, everyone starts going crazy and turning into zombies. And it's been compared to 5G. There's a Stephen King novel called The Signal, where cell phones turn people into zombies. I forgot the slide for that. Yet the reason this is happening and the markers are around the galaxy to be unearthed is because there's a species that looks like the moon. And when you turn on a marker, they let out all their little tentacles and they start eating everything on top of the world. And so they can make more moons and keep the cycle going over and over and over. Then they just launch more markers out into reality, so hopefully someone turns them on. And this theme is in a lot of video games about like the moon being evil. This is from the Zelda games, where there's one of the games is about a moon that's going to crash on the Earth, but it's actually sentient. There's a movie called Moonfall, where the moon's actually hollow, and was built by ancient beings, and there's this like black goo sentient AI that's taken it over, and it's messing up with the moon's orbit, so it's like destabilizing the entire realm and causing all these cataclysms. And in Star Wars, it always makes me think of like the Death Star is not a moon. You think it is at first, but it's actually an artificial construct that can shoot lasers. And back to Dead Space, there is a being of aliens that are long since dead that are in an ice wall that have all these secrets and are trying to save all life in the galaxy from the evil moons. A lot like the Halo series with the Mantle of Responsibility. And they had to kill all of themselves to stop the cycle, since the evil wouldn't have anything more to eat and would go dormant again in the ice. And the biggest religion in these entire games called unitology, and they're trying to brainwash everyone into basically becoming a zombie and fueling these moons, even though no one really knows that's the truth until it's too late. And the weaponry in this game is mainly blue plasma, like ship cutting tools and things like that, since zombies' normal weapons don't usually work that well. Just the symbolism, though, of all these blue beams and it being harnessed by the good guy as well. So this is back to the Doom video game earlier, and it's not only were the demons partially mechanical, a lot of the angels who didn't do their job but still don't look like demons are mechanical as well. And the main way it all works is through the portal symbolism right there. And back to the 40K universe I was talking about earlier, the one where they travel through hell. The person that opens up the portal, all the evil people come through and demons come through, is Abaddon. Just like the bottomless pit and the biblical reference, and he even has the 8-pointed star as his logo right there. So it just kind of keeps adding up. And in that realm, there are multiple entities of chaos. There's, knowledge and excess and blood and disease and decay. And it's kind of like the four horsemen of the apocalypse in a way. And I just kind of wanted to... I've been talking a lot about what would it be like to live in those universes. And 40K is kind of known as a meme that you don't want to live there. Like, it just kind of sucks all around. Yet, entertainment-wise, it's freaking amazing, and it's why it's becoming such a big thing culturally. And Dead Space has kind of been linked to the cultural paradox and the dark forest theory I was getting to later. Earlier Arthur C. Clarke had the quote on the page of the Throne of God about magic and technology being indistinguishable. And being alone or having company when you're opening up infinite energy portals isn't always a good thing either, which I was talking about in the last one, but it's interesting that this is noted on a societal phenomenon, and there's a lot of people writing stories about that. And the archetypal hero in almost every single one of these stories that I just talked about is just some random traumatized dude that's using technology to give him a super suit to allow him to survive all this craziness. And it's interesting that when you combine it all with people getting superpowers as well, this is another meme from the Incredibles movie, like, where is my super suit? Because it goes along with the theme of needing to prepare against things like that, since right now our society and our day-to-day lives is not compatible with these things. This is from South Park again, Imagination Land. That the things in our minds somewhere are actually real, and I'll have a lot more examples of this later. I mainly just want to touch in on this now, that there's also the dark side of it, that there's a place where all the evil things are. And that kind of mirrors so many of these stories, is when that barrier goes down. And when I was looking at the background of this, it made me think so much of Lord of the Rings and Mordor, that this interdimensional being Sauron starts trying to materialize in our realm, and he starts making all these abominations, and he opens up the floodgates, and the realm of man really isn't having a good time, and they all have to come together, or else they'll be picked off one by one and go on the hero's journey and all that. And in Imagination Land, the way to get to it is a blue plasma stargate in Area 51, which I'll give more evidence later. And earlier that this, if you tie it with the whole Egyptian stargate idea, that they're connecting Area 51, aliens, and Ascension all together. And further back, you can take it to the Nazis. This is from the Hellboy movie, that they're making blue plasma portals to communicate with interdimensional tentacle beams that will fall from the sky and shoot giant red plasma beams, and they'll start replicating on our Earth, creating a bunch of abominations. I feel like I should have like a bingo card. This is a movie called Glorious that I really wanted to include because on the surface it's just a potty joke, and it leaves that behind and starts throwing all this cosmic truth out, and that mirrors so much in our reality, along with the memes, that he gets trapped in this truck stop bathroom, and it's like a time loop or in a closed system, and he can't leave no matter how much he tries. And it's not what he thinks. It wants like one of his organs so he can prevent the apocalypse. That if he has his own mini apocalypse and does a selfless sacrifice, that the rest of the world outside that little bathroom there will be fine. Yet if he doesn't, that tentacle plasma monster that's right across the veils, Big Father, will come in, and it'll go to everyone on that reality. So the question of this movie is, like, do you have a small personal apocalypse where you close the door, or do you just open up and let it in and just go for the big shebang, since we're talking about stories? And this is another one of those video games. This is probably one of the ones I played the most in my childhood. Like, I put years into this video game, and so did so many people. And when I first started playing it, this plot line, because there are many sequels, is that this green plasma portal opens up, and there's this demonic incursion that happens. So the world has to band together and fight through the portals to banish the demons back to their home realm. And to the right there, that was actually the character I played. They're tentacle space aliens from space that crash land in a crystal. And especially this character is a paladin, which is a warrior of the light that specializes in banishing demons and healing people. I even had the armor. It's kind of crazy to me how much it lines up. And the sequel to that video game is a fallen paladin that uses blue plasma and a demon-possessed sword to bring the dead and dragons back to life from the ice wall. And I kind of wanted to pivot this into Cthulhu and H.P. Lovecraft, since this being from another place trying to get here and do what it wants and mess everything up is a recurring theme, and he was one of the first ones to really put that in the mass mainstream society, and he'll keep popping up more and more later. Nicolas Cage is one of those actors that has a very interesting role in his movies, and he is in one of the H.P. Lovecraft films off... I can't remember it, but it's about a meteor that falls down from the sky, and it starts mutating everything, and they tie it heavily to plasma and the movie The Thing. So it's, what if The Thing wasn't just in Antarctica? And that's further along the idea of Cthulhu, that you're trying to wake him up, and that if he wakes up from his dream that we're all in, that things start getting funky. There's a movie called Dagon that's a remake of the book The Mouth of Innsmouth, that the local fishermen started making deals where they get gold from Cthulhu beneath the water while he's kind of still slumbering, and generation by generation they become more hybridized and they're trying to find pure innocent people to add to the cult, and eventually they want to get out of the basement, the rich basement they're in, and bring this to everybody. This is one of my mom's favorite shows, The American Horror Story. And it's interesting because it follows this cyclical reincarnation in a way that it's a very similar archetype every time about evil that was hidden coming to the surface. It goes from asylums to freak shows to covens to, all kinds of things. And over the last few years, they've been getting really interesting with the symbolism. And it kind of mirrors along things like Rosemary's Baby and movies made like that. And they've also been tying it to the apocalypse as well. And merging aliens and vampires together with humanity and Area 51. And kind of like the black pill. And even the water and the fire world. The symbolism is very strong there. In that the gray aliens are connected to Aleister Crowley and early abduction accounts that we use in our mass media. And I think it just looks like Voldemort in that this archetype keeps playing out over and over and over. And on the top left right there, those are Voldemort's followers, the Death Eaters. And on the right is the Purge, when you get to do whatever you want and all the crazy people come out. And you have things like Eyes Wide Shut and then back to American Horror Story right there, that the themes keep being shared and regurgitated between these shows, basically saying the same thing. This is another one of my mom's favorite shows that's more of a comedy, but about vampires and how they live their lives in secret. And the guy on the far right there with the glasses, he's actually an energy vampire, so he's constantly trying to piss people off because he feeds on energy and frustration instead of blood. And one of my favorite series ever is called The Strain, where it's a vampire invasion from the old world, yet the main part of it is a red parasitic worm that makes you live forever. And there is a ton of symbolism in this show. One of the last episodes is called the Ouroboros, and the cycle of it, and how you deal with that. And the person that brought it into the world, I don't remember his name, but it has to do with stone. So it's basically a billionaire that has to do with stones that brings this ancient evil into the world because he, anyone want to guess? Live forever. And this actor right here has been in 2 vampire movies recently, and we're back to Nicolas Cage, who plays Dracula, that Dracula doesn't want to come out of the basement and find his own victims. He wants to have a lackey that can go out in the sun and go find people for him. And the movie's about how he becomes free of that influence. And more recently, he made one where Nosferatu tries to take him over. And this guy right here signs a real estate contract with him back like in Vivarium that allows Nosferatu to go back to his hometown and start preying on what he loves. Like how vampires need permission to come inside if you've locked your door. That they follow this similar pattern. This is a movie called Cure for Wellness, where there's a spa in Switzerland that uses eels to make you live forever. Or not live forever, but for a long time. And there's a lot of heavy symbolism in this movie as well, that an eyeball of a stuffed animal up on the walls watching him walk in duality, walk in this weird hospital castle spa thing where people lose their memories and they're being experimented on. And he eventually leaves. He can't stay there because he'll just keep losing his memory over and over. And he finds divine care there. So eventually he leaves it all behind as it's burning down to a new, better life. This is a good one called Late Night with the Devil. It's a very recent movie that's... I guess about a true story. I haven't looked into it, about a live TV show that was trying to summon a demon out of a possessed girl. And the host of the show in this movie is a part of Bohemian Grove, but he's dissociated, so he can't really remember it and its implications. This movie is very graphic if you watch it, by the way. And later on, when they summon the demon, they actually used AI in this movie for the scenes that he gets trapped in the time loop in duality. And I think it's a few minutes of the movie, and he has to keep waking up in basically fake dreams over and over and over and find the flaws in them and wake back up. But he's waking back up in multiple dreams. And one of the most interesting things about this movie is how it's filmed. It's filmed like they talk to the audience especially many times and how they film it, and that there's all these people watching it. It's about entertainment, yet the people that have to act it out and are not in the audience don't have the best time. And later on they say that the reason she's being possessed is because of an electric worm that is allowing a demon to possess her. And at the very end of the movie, her face turns into plasma itself, like out of her eyes, almost like the eye of Sauron, and she gets all these magic powers, and they basically have to banish her. But it really wasn't a fun time. Recently, Netflix released this show called Parasite the Grey, where these parasites fall from heaven, and they try to take over your head, so they take over your body. Yet the main character can't take over her body, so she has to enter this symbiotic relationship with this alien parasite to save the day. And back to one of those video games, Halo, that I was talking to about with the mantle of responsibility and the galactic-wide good versus evil. The evil in that is this like parasitic fungus infection that can take over any life, and it just keeps propagating itself. And when enough of it happens, it forms like a hive mind consciousness. And in that, they're in the ring cycle. There's actually a giant ring that if things go wrong, there's a giant plasma detonation and it kills all life and resets reality. So that they don't have any food anymore. So they kind of just go back into dormancy until life scatters back into the universe, because these are basically like arcs as well. And they're miniature worlds, artificial worlds that have the ability to also cleanse all the life on them if the science experiment on them goes wrong. A very popular video game that was made into a TV show called The Last of Us is basically zombies with fungus. That fungus start taking over people when the world starts falling apart and getting warmer. They make a point in the beginning of the series that doesn't happen in higher life forms much right now, because the temperature of the Earth is not high enough. Yet the last couple years, the temperature of the ocean has risen by at least 2 degrees, and we've been setting heat records of our written history for a few years now. And there are actually mind-controlling funguses that affect ants and other smaller insects and things like that now. And specifically to do the bidding of the fungus. And it has the ability to connect with neural pathways in the mind. There's this video game that was made called Darkwoods, where a meteor falls down from the sky and it causes all the plants to start growing exponentially. So they can't leave anymore, because if they try to cut down the trees, they just grow back. So they're kind of stuck there, and people start mutating because of the fungus. And the fungus turns out to be a sentient hive mind entity that is trying to trap people in it so that people are stuck in its dream. And that the true ending of the game is burning down the tree so that all the souls can be free from the tree, and that the cycle resets itself back to the human world. There's a very recent movie made in about Russia, they have the one of the deepest holes mined in the world, and they create a secret underground military base there, and all that on the wall is fungus that's being kept alive by the heat, and it's kept in check by the permafrost above it. And yet now that humanity's created this rabbit hole down to it, it's trying to use humanity to go back up to it. So there's this fight between good and evil, as evil's trying to take over to not let it out into all the other areas in the world. Just keep it into that contained artificial environment. And there's a lot of symbolism between the two becoming one in a weird way. Yet at the end, one of the people infected is the reason why it doesn't escape. He makes a self-sacrifice, almost kind of like Neo in the Matrix, to make sure the evil doesn't get out. And it's just black goo, fungus. The main focus on that is fungus. Oh, this is, I forget the movie, but it's from the 90s, about that oil turns into this sentient entity. And they have a scene in the church where it has all these tentacles coming out to it and it starts possessing people. So I really wanted to put that in there. And this is from The Mist, about some of the monsters from it and all the weirdness that comes out from this portal that opens up. This was a really interesting video game that was made a few years ago of a bunch of messed up stuff. But the entire point of this video game is the messed up version of the two becoming one, and parasitic entities trapping you in their dream. Like, that's a parasitic entity that has a dude's head right there, and now the parasitic entity wouldn't be able to do any of this if he didn't have a real dude. So this only works for if he has a real human being, and not only that, he tricked the human being into this ritual. So if the human being had known the whole setup beforehand, he could have saved himself from being trapped in a false dream. This is a movie I want to talk about because it's very close to home and it represents so many of these archetypes and things like that, is Antlers. It's in the Pacific Northwest, and I didn't get a quote of it, but the first thing they say is that humanity's turned evil as a whole, and we've poisoned the world, so these black spirits come to life, and they use our bodies to exact Mother Earth's revenge. It's very Native American inspired, and it happens in Oregon, and I'm in Washington, so it's very close to home. And the whole town is broken down. Every part of their lives are decaying in this movie. And every kind of trauma you can think of is in this movie, which is very interesting because that relates so much to our day-to-day world. And he does some picture drawings, and I'll try to keep it PG with that. That, especially in this one, that the spirit of the Wadingo needs a live human being to keep itself alive. Especially in this movie, that it needs this innocent child that it kind of keeps in its lair the entire time for it to keep sustaining itself. And they make a parallel with the movie Alien, because in the Alien movies they need you and then the alien bursts out of you, and the same thing happens with this evil entity, that it needs humanity and real people to propagate itself. And there's a scene in this where they go to the old police chief that's Native American, and they show him all the evidence, and he's like, oh yeah, I know what this is. And they're like, but that's not real. This isn't real. And he's like, well, not to you, not how it was, but hey, things changed. And this has been spoken about in almost every ancient culture over and over and over again. And that the point of this movie was that even though the main character had all this trauma of every kind, childhood trauma, dream trauma, family trauma, giant monsters now, it just keeps happening. And she'll go down into the deep cave and fight this monster to save the innocent boy and, save the world. And I just found that interesting that they combined all that. And that if you got attacked by this monster, you got infected by black goo that slowly turned you into the monster. And that in the Alien movies, the aliens that I just showed were a genetic experiment created by these forerunner elf-like beings, and black goo. Like, the black goo creates the alien bioweapons that humanity ends up going to war with in this giant battle of good and evil that mirrors this idea of zombies. And this is the Venom movie series that they came out with Marvel about this black symbiote from space, this black goo, merging with humanity, and he ends up being this kind of not a good guy. There's been a big focus lately, especially back with Deadpool and Wolverine, that we don't really have the shiny, clean good guys in our reality really anymore. It's this weird in-between gray mix. And in the last movie, they make this point to show that this goo taking over a horse, like one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. And in the last movie, evil in the abyss needs the combined version of evil and good in this great mixture to open up the gate between these worlds. And these monsters start popping up through literal portals to try to bring back Venom into the abyss so they can open it up. That they need the symbiotic relationship to open up the gate. And this brings me to the Whore of Babylon. And I even found one where she's riding a green dragon, which I found very synchronistic. So there's 7 dragon heads and I believe 10 horns. I would have to look it up. Yet it's connected to dragon, which is Kundalini, the chakras, and the Sephiroths. And on the right there, she has a beehive on her head. So it's the lady in red from like the Matrix that needs to take over the awakened Kundalini masculine energy so that she can reshape Earth in her messed up image. And it kind of goes back to the male, divine masculine and feminine, and earlier how I said that in this cycle, I think based on the pre-programming, that the new head bad guy, that every time you do this, that someone else has to take up the mantle like Resetting Reality does. It's just like masks on a stage being acted out, that it's not the same person, that it moves from person to person. So in the newest Hellboy movie, which was publicly seen as a crappier remix of the originals, hey, has that happened before? And a evil female is trying to get him to get his crown back and grow his horns back, like Loki earlier. And they have some one-eye symbolism. And she's a witch that you can't kill. Like, she'll just come back later on, even if you try to mess up her body. And that if she does awaken Hellboy, that'll open up all these demonic portals and all these demons will come out, and it's not a very fun time. And the original that I pointed to earlier had the blue portal, so on either side of the remake of the original or the offshoot, it's still basically the same story. And in the original, inside the portal, this is like a giant Cthulhu monster trapped in ice that they're shining light on into, which you don't want, because if the portal's big enough, they'll just shiggy-diggy on in and have a party. This is from one of the Godzilla movies that they made recently, that there's this giant electrical alien monster snake thing trapped in the ice of Antarctica, and it ends up getting out, and Godzilla, who's the good guy, representing, I would say, this Kundalini plasma energy, has to fight this alien lightning from space that wants to kill everybody and eat them. This is also in the Transformers movies. This is Omnicron? I can't remember his name, but he's a giant planet, red plasma planet-sized eating entity that goes from planet to planet, harnessing their resources. And it's interesting because they fight in his head later on, so it's like in the mind of God itself, but it's fractal, so that's eating other things as well, above and below. And even in one of the new Thor and Loki movies, the villain is feminine in the Queen of Blades. And it goes on later on that this giant red plasma demon is summoned that resets the age they're in. So recently, for whatever reason, it's not for whatever reason. Elon Musk is trying to convince the world that he's one of the best Diablo 4 players there ever is, even though almost at every gambit it shows that he's basically lying. It was publicly shown he was lying about it a few months ago, but now he's trying to go, wait, no, guys, it's legit. So this game, Diablo, is about Lilith coming from hell through a portal and trying to take over the world, and she needs a real person to do it. Crazy, huh? And that earlier on in their history, heaven and hell, or at least an angel and Lilith from hell, ended up trying to make a truce in their own little world somewhere else away from the infinite fight of good versus evil because they were bored of it, had humanity. And the original ones were the Nephilims, and they had all this crazy powers like the demigods. And as it went on, it became this giant mess. So heaven and hell had to step in, and they banished the Lilith and the angel and reset humanity without superpowers, and is trying to let them do their own thing as heaven and hell have their war unseen to the massive humanity. Yet now Lilith is back, and she's trying to bring all of her demons, and humanity has to figure out something about it. And back to the Doctor Strange movies about how there was this witch trying to break into new realities so she could take them over. This keeps on happening with another villain in the Deadpool movie that's also female, that's trying to destroy realities in her own image. So Marvel just keeps repeating it over and over and over. And Deadpool, the fourth wall breaking character, has an affair with death itself. It just kind of keeps adding on this weird flip of the corrupted divine feminine. This is from the Blade Runner movies that follows the Chosen One motif that I'll go into later. Yet this artificial blue plasma projected being is trying to trap him through his trauma and to force him into a fake life because he can't live a real one. On top of a bunch of other things. I'll go into Doctor Sleep a whole bunch later because it connects so much with this. But the main villain in this is a female vampire that feeds off your pain and suffering in weird rituals so she can live forever. And all these people are like hundreds, if not thousands of years old that are nomadically going around preying on psychic children, especially so they can live forever. This is from one of the animes where everyone all of a sudden gets superpowers. Yet in this one specifically, they get superpowers by making pacts with demons. And this dude right here ends up making a pact with a demon, yet the demon gives him basically full control. So he can be a kind of morally gray superhero. And the corrupted feminine is trying to control his mind. And that little snail right there, that thing on top right there, is like one of those fungus parasites that takes over a snail and uses it for its own agenda, and so that the parasite can reproduce at the expense of the snail. And in the intro of this show, it shows her trying to feed that snail to the guy that's trying to be a moral person and use his, superpower she just got, not for evil, yet she wants to put a dog collar on him and use him and weaponize him for whatever she wants, and she controls the control devil. So she just wants to control everything in her image and wants to take over the ascended guy just like the Whore of Babylon does. And in one piece that I'll go over later, one of the biggest pre-programming in the world right now, one of the main characters wanted to be a dog for a literal succubus demon that works for the world government and was trying to kill him earlier. This is a movie called 13 Warriors where Antonio Banderas travels to basically the ends of the earth to fight these supernatural beings, and these supernatural beings worship this corrupted feminine right here, and she has like plasma powers and can bring people back to life, and they have to banish her so their home world is saved. And they also attack in the fog, like they can't attack in the daylight, like orcs from Lord of the Rings too. So they have to attack at night and in the mist, like all these mythos. And in the movie, their totem is the fertility goddess. This thing that you're idolizing below the goodness of reality. You're trying to focus on all the material things. And this has popped up in more spots than one, and I wanted to connect it with the divine feminine. That's kind of this ancient version of it trying to control humanity. And here's a meme about this that, this is nothing new. We have these hieroglyphs from thousands of years ago of hybrid beings controlling, people, reptile hybrid beings controlling people with giant heads like the alien greys that control the kings that get everyone to kill each other as a giant entertainment ritual for the, small g gods above. And then we just see this mirroring out again cycles later with our own context and modern themes. And it builds up from human agencies and organizations you can point to and some you can't, to you start getting to the AIs and the robots, and then you get to the interdimensional reptilian beings, and you get to the weird light bringing reality creating beings like the demiurge. And that it's all a hierarchical system of them following each other. And in one of those video games earlier of the blue portal opening up after they try to harness infinite energy, the alien species is called the Combine. Because they can't make their own things, they're this race of psychic beings that enslave other lesser beings. And then they kind of combine them with technology and dehumanize them and make them like their own security guards. And that those hybridized security guards enslave the rest of humanity. Because to them, this is basically like a truck stop. Like, they got other things going on. They want to do this as easily and as simply, and with us betraying ourselves as much as possible and selling ourselves out, for day-to-day commodities, as as like hell itself is coming out of a portal and trying to enslave people. So that we're stuck here. And, like in that Science 5 movie, they don't add the whole spiritual aspect, so it seems kind of limited and dark. Yet, you can look at it that, they're the inferior thing here trying to trap you, and the only thing they got going for them really is the mind wiping and all the bullcrap. Yet that if this system changes and all this plasma comes in, that it's basically like the Akashic records opening up as well. So you can't, and I was talking about earlier with like telepathy and all that, you can't really trap people like they are now. It becomes like this much bigger fight between good and evil, yet not everyone wants that. Some people want the suburban, cubicle 9 to 5 instead of, dragons and monsters and things like that. And that we're building this world with all this technology to trap us into it, but we have to agree to it like the vampire does. We have to buy into it and increasingly go with it. And here's a few more memes I wanted to share that the technology we were talking about earlier that looks like Solomonic sigils bypasses the Solomonic Pact, that demons aren't allowed to make themselves seen or be able to speak with us, yet now they can interface with us through technology, because in my opinion we have all these safeguards against demonic incursion. Like, we have to choose it, yet computers, like, I don't think they quite have that safeguard. That's debatable. And that these sigils are in so much more of our technology as well. These are automatic transmissions, and they have that very same logo. And I don't have it here, but I'll go into it later, that in a sci-fi series, one of the biggest pre-programming sci-fi series in America right now, that one of the episodes is that his car battery, or his car engine, is a battery, and inside the battery is a fractally small civilization that he's convinced to give all their energy. Like, they kind of simplify it, and I'll show it later. They have treadmills that come down from the heavens, and he comes down as an alien and tells them all to run on the treadmills because he's their god, and that's just running his car. And when you can, look at the computers and the fractal nature of reality, how far is that from the truth when you start looking at computer chips that look like city grids, and how computer chips also look like how they used to build monuments and pyramids, and how they all face towards the stars. It's as above, so below. And when you combine the physical with the technology, you start getting a very interesting picture. And we were talking about fungus earlier. If you put it in the petri dish, it's called a culture. So it might be kind of a hint, hint, wink, wink that, it might seem small to us, yet if you do the whole fractal thing, there's life down there. I'll have to remember later, but there's an Ant-Man movie called Into the Antverse? It's something like that where he shrinks down and there's more life down there, even though it doesn't look like that. And we get to the code-like nature of our reality and how it's not as physical as we think it is. And so we can combine all that, all these different kinds of entities trying to steal the light so they can have their own pony show that most other people don't want to be a part of. So I just want to start covering Eastern examples now. We'll be able to dive a little bit into these. For now, yet I don't think I have time to do all these, so we'll start with this. This one's called Berserk. It starts out like Game of Thrones or a fantasy kind of offshoot from our reality, but there's no monsters really. It's just people fighting each other. As it goes on, monsters start showing up, and one person betrays all of his friends that if he does this eclipse ritual, that he transports them all to this demon desert world where they can be sacrificed to this black sun, so that that's also red as well, that traps all this consciousness inside of it, so they can be immortal demon gods and reshape reality to their image. And the main character in the show, that's if you look to the right there, the top white guy, the Falcon, is the demon lord, and the bottom guy is the hero, which kind of, especially in Japan, will follow this image that on the surface it looks like the good guy is evil, but it's kind of like a tool. That if superpowers are just a tool, it depends how you use them. If they're good or evil. And most times, first appearances are deceiving. He gets branded after he escapes the demon world and goes back to the regular world. And it's called the Brand of Sacrifice. And there's a movie called Branded where he goes to the red heifer ritual that's in the Bible. And then he can see all these egregores and thought forms that were always there, like the demons in Berserk, but no one can see them. Though he can see them now because he was a part of that ritual. And after that ritual, there's all these demons and hybrids that start popping into the real world. And it's really not fun for the average person because they're not built like that. And they create this giant paradise called Falconia that has, all these angel wing symbolism around it. Yet this is the home of the evil guy. He specifically makes this false paradise to lure in everyone to save themselves from all the monsters. Yet below the city is a bunch of monsters he's just, keeping under wraps until he gets the cycle ready again and he can steal all of their souls. And while this is happening, there's this giant plasma tree that's around that's opening up all these gates and is bringing all this energy back to the world. And it ties back to the eclipse as well. And I talked earlier a game called Dark Souls that was about resetting reality. And in this game, that's called the Sign of the Undead. That it's like this fantasy age with dragons and monsters and things like that. And it's not so bad to start out with, there's these mighty god kings, and they make these big castles and fortresses. And yet it starts degrading and falling apart like our reality is now. And the people that were in charge of keeping the status quo maintained kind of left their posts. So now some random undead person has to go through it, collect all their souls, and can reset reality in the image they want. It's called kindling the bonfire, raising the torch, so to speak. And I was saying earlier that if you do this, reality will keep recycling itself, and that later on in the third game, you have to fight the archetype of yourself from the first game that reset the fire. And in the third game, reality is getting even crazier, and it's even more miserable than it was. And because people can't die, it just keeps going on and on and on. And it's like that Bible verse earlier I was talking about, that people are asking God, like, can you shorten this? And that later on in Revelation, they talk about how it has to be shortened because it's so messed up. And people are like, hey, I do not want to be a part of this. I do not want to be in this play. And in the Dark Souls games, past, future, and all different realities are all collapsing in on themselves as it's happening, and people are losing their memory and, you know, just not having a fun time. And people are invading other that red ghost is from another reality, and he's invading this dude's own timeline. And these serpents that live underground are trying, that have the Eye of Sauron, are trying to get the main player to reset reality. Yet you can either do a light age or a dark age where you take all that energy for yourself instead of putting it back into the system and making it very similar to how it was. And that's kind of the ending, where you use that fire, that plasma that you collected from all the small G gods to reset reality. And it's connected with like ash and dust and cinder and the fire apocalypse, along with the water world. And there was this YouTube video that was made called Dark Souls 3 is Thinking of Ending Things, that has stuck with me for a long time, because they compare it to a movie called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And the movie is about this janitor at a high school, and he's imagining all these fantasy worlds because his life sucks. And he doesn't really want to keep being a janitor, cleaning up all this stuff. Yet, the people in his fantasies think their reality is real. They don't know they're in a dream, yet as it goes on, more and more and more, they start finding all these clues that their reality isn't as real as they thought it was, and it's just this reprojection of these archetypal stories over and over and over in this old mind of God that doesn't want to do it anymore. It wants to find someone else to do it. And that connects with Dark Souls 3, and that at the ending of that game, reality is colliding in on itself, and they have to figure out a new reality to make, because I guess the best way to put it would be like, you're in a James Bond movie, but you're like, I don't want to make another similar James Bond movie. Let's just make this like another series entirely, because we're tired. The James Bond stuff is good for a while, yet the amount of pain and misery you have to get along with the cool stuff, if you're physically acting it out on the stage with them, is not worth it in most people's opinions. There's a game from that series that goes even darker, that just looks at the full dark side of it, called Bloodborne, where you're trapped in a dream by a blood transfusion. And it's going full Lovecraftian Cthulhu, and everyone's locking themselves in their houses, they're going insane, increasingly monsters are showing up. This is happening because of a moon eclipse ritual. And it's all happening because that's basically a deep elder Cthulhu god whale thing that's dead. And they pulled it up, the scientists from that world pulled it up from the abyss and extracted its blood and started giving that blood to everybody. And started mutating everyone and turning them into monsters and turning reality itself into this nightmare. And it turns out that reality was a part of this evil whale's dream. And I'll actually be going a lot more into whale dreams later on. It comes back. And that's kind of one of the final bosses of that game. But it's related back to that Cthulhu game, that in this cycle the evil came up from the abyss and is corrupting humanity. And not only that, it's happening from the moon, and the moon's hiding this false reality from everybody. The main character sees this more and more as he goes throughout the game, and it's called Madman's Knowledge. And the final boss of this video game is the old person who reset reality, and he's like just now telling you this, and he's basically trying to save you the trouble. Like, he's just gonna kill you. He's like, just go to, like, just leave this dream, buddy. Like, you don't want to be the top watcher in this dream, like they were saying in the Loki series. Like, it sucks. So I'm just gonna piece you out of here, and the only reason you'd want to stay is that you wanted to live forever and run the show here. And that he himself has long since been tired of this dream. So he simultaneously wants to save people from it, yet he wants to peace out from the position as well, yet someone has to take it over. And it has this moon symbolism there. Yet you can choose to fight him and take over the dream. And beyond that, there's a hidden ending that there's this Cthulhu entity in the moon that actually made this dream itself. And that the guy you just fought was just the caretaker of it. You know, he was just the middleman. And that if you can see through to the true ending, you can fight the being that actually made reality. And if you beat it, you're reincarnated as a squid being that will take over the dream from there. So this game is kind of like a giant cautionary tale of, you know, not investing yourself in the system fully. Yet, and this goes back more to Cthulhu as well, and I don't think this is the only ending, but just that it's one of the possible endings you could do. This is this game that was made, I believe, in Europe somewhere, about how gods, small g gods, are made and change reality, and how these ages are formed. And the second game focuses on the sentience of the moon that turns everyone crazy. And in the first game, there's this one scene I always think of, that there's these people in bunny mask in this grove, and they're doing all this debaucherous stuff, and they're doing this specifically because they know they're in the dream of their patron god. So their patron god's watching them in this grove, and if you you have a choice to participate with it, and, you know, join all the fun debauchery. And if you do it too many times, you lose the game and it's over, because you lose your free will because you choose to become a part of this lesser god's dream instead of your own. And I found this when I was trying to look up lunacy for a picture, that it turns people crazy. It takes away who they were and turns them more into a beast. And this says specifically, this black moon, empty yourself of everything. There's a movie called The Empty Man I'll go into later about emptying yourself out for egregores from another reality that goes on the same idea that I think they're trying to get to in this idea as well. And then we can go back to the Hellraiser series, that if you solve this puzzle cube box, that they're allowed to come in, and you don't want to go through the Hellraiser movie experience, because that's no bueno. This is a John Carpenter movie. It's part of the Carpenter, I believe it's the Apocalypse trilogy, that The Thing's a part of as well, and I'll go over the last movie later. That in the poster of this movie, that there's an eclipse symbolism right there, and the church is hiding basically the physical incarnation of Satan, which looks like this green plasma stuck in an artifact, and that Satan's trying to invade our reality through space and time, and is possessing people to basically turn them into zombies so they can open up a doorway like shown, and that doorway goes to the abyss. And people are trying to warn the good guys through their dreams in space and time from the future to not let this doorway open up. And this is it from Stephen King earlier, about this shape-shifting interdimensional being that's come here to feed on us because it can't live on its own. And that it's specifically made out of plasma, and they call it the deadlights, and it feeds on your worst fear, and it especially wants to go after innocence. And in the second movie they came out with, they actually go into the origin story, which this little 30-second snippet of this movie speaks so much. That this inverted phoenix, and that this trinity of red plasma comes down, and if you look below them, you see people fighting all these weird hybrid beings, and that even kind of looks like the ritual sacrifice symbol right there. And it changed its appearance. So some people look like a thunderbird, and it would look like other things to other people, so people could only report on what they saw. So other nationalities had different stories, so it might be a phoenix or a dragon or things like that. Yet it was tied to the shape-shifting plasma being that comes here to clean house. And in the first and second movie of it comes back every 27 years, so it follows this cyclical cycle of all the archetypes having to come back, and everything's a little different, yet the villains, for a lesser word, kind of the same. The good news is they win the day by just calling him small, because he is a plasma egregore that is a reflection of what they think it is. So if they're afraid of him and think he's this big bad monster, he responds to that and reflects it. Yet if they say, hey, if they start smack talking him and calling him small and weak and he ain't nothing, because if you look at the grand order of things, he's trying to trap them. He's the vampire. They're the divine source. So he can only feed on them and trick them and track them in reality if he can make them forget the actual order of things. So this is one of the cruxes of the presentation, why I wanted to update it, is Full Metal Alchemist. And it's that they could bridge the gateway between these worlds through alchemical sigils and operations. So instead of their world, instead of superpowers, they do alchemy. So if you're a fire alchemist, if you have the sufficient sigils and materials, you can bring about fire. Or change, if you're a stone alchemist, you can change certain stones into other stones, if you have the energy. And that's their version of magic. And that the door, they call it the Gate of Truth, or the Tree of Life in the Sephiroths, the Gate of Truth. And there's these interesting beings on the other side that, and some of them are homunculuses that are building a giant summoning shape sigil underneath the entire country itself. And so they want to do a giant magical ritual, and the old civilization that they did it on is below it. So they built a civilization on top of the old one, so if you dig down deep enough, you can see all this old architecture and things like that from the old age on top of the new world they have. And this is done by the homunculus that have the Ouroboros symbolism as well, and the triangle, and the Eye of Sauron as well. So he can't physically be here, and they're all jealous of humanity. Like the Eye of Sauron, that it's not physically here, but it wants to make a body. And they start trying to do that, and they find out that humanity's soul is the perfect fuel, like in the first Harry Potter movie, the Philosopher's Stone. And that if they get enough human bodies, they can make a body for these homunculuses that are based upon the 7 deadly sins. And they've just been doing that over and over and over again. And it creates this big, that's the whole country right there. So it creates this door, and this giant Sauron monster comes up, and he grabs the sun itself. He captures the generative force and gets his body back. The main character ends up defeating him and throwing his ass back into the dimension, the Gate of Truth, into his own reality. And there's a whole lot of entities there, and they're very interesting and kind of creepy as well, and are based upon tentacles as well and duality. So it all kind of mashes together. And adding on top of that, they rebooted the series, and actually people say the sequel in this one's better. Weirdly enough. Though in the original one, it was a lot sadder. So if you were in the original series and you were the main character, it sucked. When in the new one, it has a really nice happy ending, and in comparison. Yet the original ending was that the parallel world was the World War I world, where they have science and technology, and they have their world with alchemy. And that they actually swap places because they end up opening the door between their realities. This is one of my favorites, and this is one of the biggest mass pre-programming ones that's been around for 30 years, called Evangelion, about this mass ritual. So the show starts out, it's just kind of like robots fighting these giant monsters, which is very popular in Japan. It goes on, though. This is Lilith in Antarctica. Uh, Kept to the cross with the spear of Longius that supposedly stabbed Jesus. And you can see there all the human limbs coming out from it. And humanity came from this being that fell from the heavens and was allowed to propagate over the earth and advance scientifically. And there was a male version of it to Lilith called Adam. And Adam makes gigantic monsters. And humanity goes to Antarctica and they end up waking some stuff up. And they reverse engineer the giants to make robots. Like, those aren't actually robots. Those are giants that they figure out how to combine with technology so that little kids can pilot them because they're the most pure and connected to source. And that these transhumanist Gnostic cults are aware of this and are trying to, because when these two fruits or aliens come together, they create a cycle of humanity becoming one and this cyclical cycle change. And one of them's from Germany right here, Sealy. They have the seven-eyed lamb, the apple with the snake around it, and the inverted triangle, which is also the one of the symbols of Voldemort from Lord of the Rings and the Trinity, which is good and bad. And a Bible quote about the firmament and God judging us above it, how we are judged and then we judge below that. And there's the Japanese organization is called NERV, and their logo is God's in his heavens, all is right with the world. And this is how they talk with each other. They have these secret Illuminati meetings. They're all, really old, being kept alive by technology because they want to make sure the cyclical cataclysm happens. And they say here the beginning and the end are one and the same. And a giant tree of life pops out in the sky during an eclipse ritual where a giant angel pops up and turns. All these crosses are human consciousness that left their body and are about to be all merged into one being. And they end up you can have a choice. You can all become one and everyone can stay that way, and then you can choose to shoot everybody off into their individual dream worlds. So the main character is that guy standing right there, and he ends up, destroying the giant angel where all the juice was put, and making his own world, which creates the giant desert world, and it's the Adam and Eve scenario. And later on, they had the original series, and then recently they started rebuilding the series into movies, and they made 4 of them. And they got increasingly weird and far from source. And about, all right, so we have, we've described this giant ritual that contains humanity. Yet, what if we're in like the 5th deep one? And we keep remaking them. And not only that, the farther and deeper we go, the more is colliding in on itself to make it even weirder. This is a show very similar called Devilman Crybaby that was on Netflix. And it's from this original Japanese anime. And I just wanted to say at this point, in the new one, they reference the old one. Like, they play the theme song of the 80s Devilman show in the fictional updated version of the Netflix show, so that the characters in the TV show that they remade, every time, like, hell starts popping up on Earth, like in the original old Devilman, they go, wait, you're like, the TV show's coming to life? Like, what are you talking about? And in the original one, this is kind of like the world before humanity. It's this lush area, and then the angels of light come down, and instead of dinosaurs, it's demons, and the demons are all just eating each other. All the plants are huge. Like, it's not a fun time if you want to be humanity. So the angels of light come down and, reset it with giant balls of light so that humanity can come up. So humanity gets their run, and one of the humans turns out to be the incarnation of Lucifer. So they start breaking the veil down, and normal people are turning into devils. So this guy has a devil, he makes a deal with the devil, yet I believe he's Amon, the first demon, and he's really pissed off about the whole thing and trying to stop Lucifer from letting demons eat the entire world, which keeps on happening. And he eventually gets all of his memory back, and decides like, hey, I'm a godlike being. What should I do with it? Oh yeah, destroy all of humanity with demons and everyone I cared about, so that God has to reset reality because I failed the test of not being an asshole. So it's gonna happen again, and the world ends with the Red Lake, like Evangelion did, and it just makes me think of the phase. Is this real or is this just a fantasy? So, I want to stop it here. Next time I'll be going more into the Asian mythology and the characters at play. We got a giant head right there, and the Ascended Chosen One using his lightning powers to fight the evil Kundalini dragon that was trying to take over the Earth, and that he can reshape reality with his Looney Tune powers. That's just the beginning. I also want to say that the next one should be a lot more positive in a way. That this was kind of the dip of the negativity, I would say, so that there's going to be a lot more positive versions of this. I just kind of wanted to lump it all together here because they were all similar. And that, like earlier, if you were trying to build a garden, that you would want to know all the things trying to get in your garden so that they don't eat all the plants you're trying to grow and the things you care about. So I want to say thank you if you're here from the future joining us for another episode, and that I appreciate you, and that the next one should be up soon. Peace.